recall anything what we discussed yesterday?
While he was living on the beach, near the beach, he'd go out on these daily walks. What's that?
No. Visakhapatnam. The place is Visakhapatnam.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And he'd go out for walks every day, and all the devotees would tail along with him, and he would kind of teach different lessons, and they were all recounting the different things they got out of those walks and different experiences they had with Prabhupada.
Then he comes to Mayapur, right? And then he says he's happy to live in simple. He doesn't need. He was very happy with the hut they made for him. In fact, he loves that one. But for people, he wanted to build a big temple, right? Big plans, everything he shared to devotees. I'll repeat from the same place again. While living so simply in Mayapur, Prabhupada spoke of his vision of a grand project yet to come. Although the deities of Radha Madhav, whom he had worshipped at the 1971 Ardha Kumbh Mela in Allahabad, were installed in a tent, he spoke of a marble palace. He also spoke of first-class accommodations for the guests and devotees, although as yet he had little to offer. Living simply and happily in his thatched hut, he gathered his disciples together and told them of his plans. At his request, devotees had built a small model of the proposed first major building. And there were also drawings of the proposed temple of human understanding. He wanted to build a Mayapur city set with quarters of each of the 4 social classes of Varnashram institution. Tatpara. When Prabhupada would go to the Western countries, he would be interviewed by many great persons. But when he came to Mayapur, he was talking so friendly, sometimes taking juice or giving instructions, and he lived simple like a villager. The Western devotees think sometimes of Prabhupada in one Leela only, like a great king. But when he comes to India, he is like another person. He was laughing and talking like a friend. Bhavanand. In his straw house, Prabhupada sat on a bamboo platform. There was a bed and some mats on the floor. That was all. He was happier there than anywhere. We put a fan in there too, and Prabhupada liked it. He liked it because it was so simple. There was an outhouse, but he didn't mind it at all. He was relishing everything. At that time, he made Jayapataka and me co-director of Mayapur. He made 4 signers on the checking account for the building constructions. In India, just to open up an account is very difficult. We were seeing that part of Prabhupada where he was very strict because he knows the difficulties you can run into. If you don't fill out the proper forms, the bank can even keep your money. Or you may want to close your account and they don't let you. Our mood was played out. We were babies, so Prabhupada was training us in keeping accounts and management. Interesting. We also didn't know all these things. They had all this. So Prabhupada shared his vision, how he wants a marble temple, big building, and temple of human understanding. Now it is called Temple of Vedic Planetarium. Just changes. Prabhupada gave the concept. And he also gave the plan of building a city. That's on the vision of Bhakti Vinod Thakur. Bhakti Vinod Thakur saw that certainly in 18th century, there's a big city came up here. He envisioned. And Prabhupada is instructing his disciples what needs to be done. Tatpara Prabhu is saying, I don't know, Prabhu Mataji, saying that in Western countries it would be interpreted by many great persons He's like sometimes people devotees see like he's a king, but here he's like laughing like an ordinary person. He's behaving like a friend. Bhavananda Prabhu was also saying his accommodation was just such a simple on a bamboo platform. Though he had everything, he could have lived any part of the world luxuriously. He could have lived in Switzerland. People offered him to Switzerland. People offered, California. People offered all the part of the world. And this is what I wanted to share with all of you contemplate that how the pure devotee is simply happy with little bit of peaceful and conducive for devotional service, small accommodation. He was very happy with his hut. He didn't have much. And Bhavanand Prabhu was saying that it is very hard in India even to open a bank account. I think recently Modi our Prime Minister had created a more facility. So many millions of accounts he created. He is facilitating those things. But it's been an old disease, looks like, since that time. These should be proper, accurate. So many things are involved. Otherwise, they may take your money also if it's not properly opened. So Prabhupada was teaching like a babies to all his disciples because they don't know. And Jayapatak Swami and Bhavanand become the Mayapur uh, project coordinator. Um, there is a coordinator? Yeah, co-directors of Mayapur. So anyway, yeah, AJ, please. You're there, AJ?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. Yep. Jananavasa. The first time Prabhupada came to see the deities, he said, "Who is dressing the deities?" Someone said, Jananavasa. The deities were just standing on a tile platform with no decoration. They were just standing there, but Prabhupada looked on them so lovingly. He used to come and take darshan every day. One time he came to the deity room and I wasn't there. There were some Indian people taking darshan, and I had gone to get them Back to Godhead magazine from a room about 20 feet away. When I came back, Prabhupada was there. He was also taking darshan, but he said, "You should always be standing here. People are coming, but no one is here." I said, "Srila Prabhupada, I just went to get a Back to Godhead. It's only 10 feet away." But he looked at me to say, as if, "You are defending yourself again, making excuses." Then he told Bhavananda, "This boy, Jananavasa, should have some help. He can't do everything. He is an ordinary person." The 5-day Gora Purnima festival featured 24-hour kirtan with groups of devotees chanting in 2-hour shifts. Each morning, the main body of devotees would form a kirtan procession and go out visiting Navadvipa's holy sites. The Nim tree under which Lord Chaitanya was born, the house of Srinivasa Acharya, where Lord Chaitanya and his associates had performed nocturnal kirtan, the spot where the Qazi had tried to stop Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan, the residence of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Often Bhaktivinoda Thakur had stood in front of this house, Prabhupada told the devotees, and looked out across the Jalangi toward where Srila Prabhupada now had his land. Throughout the day, and especially in the evenings, the devotees would gather on stage of the orange striped pandal while Radha Madhava stood at stage center within a traditional Bengali simhasana of carved banana stalks covered with colored foil and flower garlands. Prabhupada would have his disciples do most of the public speaking, with the Chutananda Swami lecturing in Bengali as the main speaker. Hundreds of people came and went in a steady stream, and the devotees distributed Bengali, English, and Hindi Back to Godhead magazines. In the evenings, they would present a slideshow or a film. Prabhupada was especially pleased to watch the prasadam distribution from his window. Hundreds of villagers squatting in long rows, eating khichdi from round leaf plates. "Continue this forever," Prabhupada told his disciples. "Always distribute prasadam." Even without a building, Prabhupada's preaching in Mayapur was significant. While other nearby matas were also observing Gora Purnima, mostly by hosting Calcutta widows who paid a fee to live a few days in a temple and visit the holy places of Navadvipa. Prabhupada's Pandal program was the most vigorous celebration and drew the most visitors. The birthplace of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Prabhupada said, had no meaning without preaching, except for this time of the year, very few people visited Mayapur. So Prabhupada would go to the temple in Mayapur and to for darshan every day, and the first thing he came in one day, he's like, who's in charge of dressing the devotees? I guess he.
It was not temple. Let me tell you,
No.
it was a pandal. It's a temporary
Oh,
setup,
okay. Okay.
right? They didn't have anything. Now I will tell you, whoever is speaking, Jananivas Prabhu, he the head puchari for whole ISKCON now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Head pujari for whole ISKCON throughout the world, and his head pujari for Mayapur. I mean, you see the Mayapur darshan, you see Radha, 8 gopis and Radha Krishna in Panchatattva. His head pujari, his head priest for them. Now go ahead.
So I guess Prabhupada felt that they weren't being dressed well enough, maybe, right? Because then Janavasa says, hey, that the deities were just on a tile platform with no decoration or anything. But he would stand there just lovingly looking at the deities regardless.
Yeah, what happens is when the deities are there, you cannot leave them just alone like that. Somebody has to be attended. So when people come, at least they should know that someone is there, a servant of the Lord, and to assist them in worship. He was new; they didn't know.
Yeah, but I like that he said. So Prabhupada didn't say it, but he said, but he could. The devotee, the disciple, knew what he was getting at, saying, "Hey, you're defending yourself again." Right? He doesn't say that Prabhupada said it. He could just tell, like, that was the look he got. Like, slow down. Stop making excuses. Here's what you should do. Which is good because I mean, you know what I mean. Like, he didn't have to say everything. It's a night. Like, these guys were kind of that in sync with him that they knew what he was thinking and what he was feeling, I guess. So he says, you got to get some help. This guy can't do it all by himself. And, then, during the festival, there was a 24-hour kirtan for 5 days straight. So that's insanely long, where devotees would come up and chant for 2 hours in shifts. And then there was a big kirtan procession around to the different holy places, the tree where Lord Chaitanya was born, Srinivasacharya's house, where Lord Chaitanya and the disciples performed kirtan at night, where the kirtan movement, where the government tried to stop the kirtan movement, and also the house of Bhakti Vinoda Thakur as well. And then the devotees would get up on stage and they would they would get out and they would do the public speaking, and Achutananda would give the lectures in Bengali as the main speaker, and they would distribute back to Godhead in all sorts of different languages to all the people that needed it. And then in the evening they would show a film or a slideshow of different ISKCON centers around the world and what people are doing. And then but Prabhupada was most taken back by, I guess, most impressed with the prasadam distribution, and how hundreds of, he'd look out his window and he'd just see hundreds of people squatting down eating from their plates. And he told him, he said, don't ever stop distributing prasad, like always do this. So yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I forgot the last paragraph there. And he's saying that, while there was stuff going on all over Mayapur, different places were doing different things, letting, it sounds like widows would go and stay at the temple for a couple of days and tour around but the Prabhupada's program
was different.
Yeah, what is Matas versus temple?
Exactly, that's what I know. You got confused.
Yeah.
Matha means other centers who Prabhupada's, it's called Matha. Matha means spiritual place. Every temple where the devotees reside is called Matha, as brahmacharis reside and worship. That's called Matha. So Prabhupada's other god brothers also established somewhat like their own small mathas, temple buildings.
Okay.
So what they are doing is they're not doing very powerful preaching. They are doing some widows are always looking for to come and spend some time at the holy dham at the special time like Gaur Purnima. So they're like, you stay here, you can do worship, you pay a little donation, like that's the work they're doing. And Prabhupada is doing very different service. He's attracting through prasadam free for thousands of people with pandal. That's what is at the time of this being talked about at the time of Gaur Purnima.
Mm-hmm. And then
Lord Chaitanya's birthday.
And then it looks like it goes to the next line there where it's kind of saying, hey, while these guys are doing something, they're not preaching, and and without the preaching, it doesn't,
Yes,
it doesn't mean anything.
right. So I think his working prasadam is changing. That's why he saw a lot of people are participating, local people also prasadam. Okay, Cycling Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Which is more important? Prabhupada asked. Lord Chaitanya's birthplace or his activities? It is his activities, his karma. His activities are more important than his janma or place of birth. The activities of Lord Chaitanya were chanting Hare Krishna and distributing love of God to all people. And this should be the activity of devotees in Mayapur. On Gaur Purnima day, 10 of Prabhupada's sannyasi godbrothers visited to participate along with Prabhupada's disciples and hundreds of visitors in the dedication and the cornerstone laying ceremony. Prabhupada was gracious and friendly towards his godbrothers, and he was gratified that they could all sit together to dedicate the world headquarters of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Sitting on a cushion next to the sacrificial arena, chanting on japa beads, Prabhupada initiated 6 Bengali devotees and awarded the sannyas order to a young American disciple. Then Prabhupada's godbrothers spoke, each expressing appreciation of Prabhupada's work in the West. Finally, they all gathered around the pit, 5 feet square, 15 feet deep. Certain articles had been collected to be placed inside the pit in accordance with the scriptures: 5 kinds of flowers, 5 kinds of grains, 5 kinds of leaves, 5 kinds of metal, 5 kinds of nectar, 5 kinds of colors, 5 kinds of fruits, and 5 kinds of jewels. Prabhupada's godbrother Puri Maharaj descended a ladder into the pit to put coconuts and banana leaves in a pot and to place this along with flowers onto the altar of bricks. Next, Prabhupada entered the pit carrying a box with a gold ruby-eyed murti of Anantasesha. Earlier that morning in his hut, Prabhupada had confidentially shown a few disciples the murti. This is Lord Ananta, he had said, the serpent bed on which Lord Vishnu rests. He will hold the temple on his head. Prabhupada now placed Anantasesha on the altar of bricks and climbed up the ladder. Then on Prabhupada's blissful invitation, everyone began to toss in offerings of flowers and money, followed by handfuls of earth. Although Prabhupada's godbrothers had praised his work on Gaur Purnima day, several of them returned a few days later to complain about his use of the title Prabhupada. Prabhupada asked his disciples to leave the room. When they were alone, one of the sannyasis godbrothers began challenging Prabhupada in Bengali. Why are you using Prabhupada? You have no right. This is our Prabhupada's title. You cannot take it. I did not take it, Prabhupada replied. They are calling me Prabhupada. What can I do? Although the sannyasi godbrother then began to criticize Prabhupada for not joining their preaching and for awarding the sacred thread and sannyas orders to Westerners, mainly the godbrothers wanted an explanation for his use of the title Prabhupada. So here, Prabhupada mentions what is more important, whether it is Lord Chaitanya's birthplace or his activity. And he says that his activities are more important than his place of birth. And his activities were chanting the Hare Krishna mantra and distributing bhakti to all the people. And this should be the activity of the devotees in Mayapur. And on Gaur Purnima day, which was also the cornerstone laying ceremony, Prabhupada's sannyasi godbrothers visited to participate along with Prabhupada, and he was happy that they could all sit together to dedicate the world headquarters of ISKCON at Mayapur. And then Prabhupada initiated 6 Bengali devotees and awarded the sannyas order to a young American disciple. And Prabhupada's godbrothers expressed appreciation for Prabhupada's work in the West. Then they all gathered around the pit, which was 5 feet square and 15 feet deep. And they had placed different articles. They were placed inside the pit in accordance with the scriptures: 5 kinds of flowers, grains, leaves, metal, nectar, colors, fruits, and jewels. And Prabhupada's godbrother Puri Maharaj, whom he had met in Visakhapatnam, he descended a ladder to put in the coconuts and banana leaves into the pit. And then Prabhupada entered the pit carrying the gold murti of Anantasesha. And Prabhupada had shown this to few disciples and said, "This is Lord Ananta, the serpent bed on which Lord Vishnu rests, and he will hold the temple on his head." And basically, after Prabhupada's invitation, everyone began to toss in offerings of flowers and money and handful of earth. So even though Prabhupada's godbrothers praised him for his work on Gaur Purnima days, they returned a few days back to complain about his use of the title Prabhupada. And one of the sannyasi godbrothers asked in Bengali, and Prabhupada asked his disciples to leave the room at the time, asking, "Why are you using Prabhupada? You have no right. You cannot take it." And Prabhupada replied back saying that, "I did not take it. His disciples are calling him Prabhupada." Then that sannyasi godbrother began to criticize Prabhupada for awarding the sacred thread and sannyas orders to Westerners. And whereas the other godbrothers mainly wanted an explanation for his use of title Prabhupada.
Nice. I have a question. Why did Prabhupada ask his disciples to leave the room?
They would be given doubt on this person criticize because they were criticized, try to criticize him, and so they don't learn to criticize the spiritual master.
No.
Like
Gaurav is explaining some, but I want to hear all of you what you say.
Like basically, when all the godbrothers are discussing, like it is not all the others were next generation disciples, so they did not have any role in that discussion. So he asked them to leave.
A little bit, not much. Who else can tell?
The disciples' faith should not be disturbed onto the spiritual master.
It's an offense. The disciples should hear the offense of the spiritual master, and disciples should always defend. And this is a very typical situation. It is they may offend, so in the faith of a disciple also may go down. And that's the way we should be dealing with. Sometimes with God brothers, you can be like a friend, equals, right? Can be an equals, but those equals, it shouldn't be done just like that. It should be done very careful, and so that the neophyte devotees or whoever it is should not get familiarity, or their faith should not go down. That's a very good thing. Okay. Prasant, you can read, please.
Brahmananda Maharaja, Prabhupada called, "Bring me a copy of my letterhead." When Brahmananda Swami returned with the stationery, Prabhupada showed it to his godbrothers. The letterhead read, "Tridandi Goswami A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, no Prabhupada." This proved that he himself did not use the title. This simple demonstration pacified his godbrothers, and he then invited them to take prasadam with him while his disciples served. Later, in his hut, Prabhupada talked with his disciples about envy. A devotee could judge his own advancement by how free he was from envy. He said, in the spiritual world, envy was conspicuous by its absence. Although all the liberated associates of Krishna were trying their best to serve Krishna, in the kind of competition, everyone was pleased with one another. If Radharani or a favorite gopi pleased Krishna, and other gopis did not think ill of her, but thought, "Oh, how nicely she has served Krishna. Let me try to offer such nice service to Krishna." So he will be even more pleased. To be envious was materialistic. Prabhupada wished his godbrothers had taken a different point of view. He wished they had not minded his being called Prabhupada by his disciples. He was also sorry that some of his godbrothers couldn't sincerely praise his work. If Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was working successfully through him, why should they be disturbed? Why not accept his work and be happy that the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was being spread effectively. They should see it as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's work, the work of their own spiritual master. It was also their work, their responsibility, and they should recognize that through the Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaja, it was being wonderfully done. At the ceremony, they had praised his work. So if they didn't mind praising him, then why not admit that for hundreds of Westerners whom he had saved from hell, he was Prabhupada, that singular pure devotee whom they always thought of as seated at the lotus feet of Krishna. In terms of authorized books produced and distributed, many number of sorry numbers of devotees initiated and engaged in devotional service and numbers of temples opened, no one could compare. Of course, in one sense, all of Prabhupada's god brothers were equally praiseworthy, as long as they followed the basic instructions of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, chanted Hare Krishna, and avoided sinful life. But if analysis or criticism was to be made with such scrutiny, then let the preaching records be scrutinized. Who, above all, was extending the mercy of Lord Nityananda and making such tremendous gains on behalf of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, gains that had previously seemed impossible. According to Chaitanya Charitamrita, if a preacher could spread the chanting of Hare Krishna, then he must be accepted as empowered by God. Prabhupada asked for Brahmananda Maharaja to bring his letterhead, and then he showed it to his god brothers. It read Tridandi Goswami A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, and there is no Prabhupada over there. So it proved that he did not take that title, but his disciples gave it to him. And then it pacified the god brothers, and they all took prasadam while the disciples served. And later, Prabhupada talked with his disciples about envy. So one can judge themselves how much advancement they did based on how much envy the disciple has. In the spiritual world, there is no envy, but in the materialistic world, it can be seen. Like he gives an analogy of how gopis served Krishna. If some gopis served Krishna very well, then the others are not envious, but they took inspiration from them. And they also want to, instead of a competition, they also took it as an inspiration, and they also wanted to do the same. And to be envious was materialistic. And Prabhupada felt that it would have been better if his god brothers taken a different point of view and not be disturbed by his disciples giving him the title Prabhupada, because the spiritual master himself is working through him, and because of his mercy he was able to establish a lot of temples and initiate a lot of disciples, and they can see all this work going on. And now if one person is able to do this, that's only because of the mercy of the spiritual master, and they can admit this and give the praise. It ultimately goes to their spiritual master. And if the analysis or criticism was to be made, such scrutiny, with such scrutiny, then he says, let the preaching records be scrutinized. I did not understand this, Prabhu. So why the preaching records be scrutinized?
Where is that?
In the last paragraph, in between. So he says, but if analysis or criticism was to be made with such scrutiny, then let the preaching records be scrutinized.
Yeah, I think, let me, if I understand correctly, number of times, what he's referring to is, this is because of the behavior of the God brothers, right? In terms of authorized books produced and distributed, number of devotees initiated, engaged in devotional, number of temples opened. No one could compare, of course. In one sense, all of Prabhupada's God-brothers were equally praiseworthy as long as they followed the basic instruction of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Chant Hare Krishna, avoid sinful activity, sinful life, right? In one level, okay, nobody is bad. Everybody is doing according to whatever they are supposed to do. Okay. But if analysis or criticism was to be made with such scrutiny, then let the preaching records to be scrutinized. What is been scrutinized means preaching records in the sense that here was there any mistake in the preaching?
Oh.
How it is done that is a mistake. They should be scrutinized. Sometimes people do whimsically. Okay, if you have any faults, you can correct. But not like you try to bring it down. So there's a positive, what do you call, positive comments, positive corrections. Positive corrections is kind of acceptable. And he had done significantly as compared to others. But this world will not accept so easily. That's the one thing. It's okay. Who's next? Nipa, please read.
Hare Krishna. Prabhupada was certainly empowered, yet he conducted himself very humbly, with no assistance from others. He had repeatedly invited his god brothers to join him in the West and take their places beside him as preachers in the Krishna consciousness movement. When had they not come forward to assist him in their spiritual master's mission instead of complaining about him, the one god brother who was carrying out Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati's mission? It was not the place of Prabhupada's disciple to criticize. However, he had sternly warned them that they had no position to do so. They should treat his god brothers as disciples of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, and therefore as on the level of their own spiritual master. Nevertheless, Prabhupada's disciples became sorry to see his lack of respect for their spiritual master. They could be humble and not protest, but how could they be affectionate toward persons who criticized their spiritual master and his Krishna consciousness movement? After the 5-day festival, Prabhupada left Mayapur for Vrindavana, where he planned to hold another groundbreaking ceremony. The Mayapur land was still completely undeveloped, and Prabhupada urged his disciples in India to continue collecting the necessary funds. We are making a very gorgeous plan at Mayapur, and if you all together can give shape to this plan, it will be unique in the whole world. It will be a world center for teaching spiritual life. Students from all over the world will come, and we shall revolutionize the atheistic and communistic tendencies of rascal philosophers. So we must be responsible for this great task. Not for a single moment shall we be without ISKCON thoughts. That is my request to you all. February 1972. During Prabhupada's absence from Vrindavan, the devotees had been unable to persuade Mr. S to grant legal permission for ISKCON to use the land. Prabhupada had insistently directed one of his Indian-born disciples, Shirodakasai, to acquire from Mr. S an actual deed. Shirodakasai had pleaded with Mr. S, and seeing Mr. S's indecision, he had spoken with Mrs. S and then with the two of them together. Mr. and Mrs. S had agreed that since they could not decide, they would put the matter before Srimati Radharani herself. Mrs. S had asked Shirodakasai to take 2 slips of paper and to write yes on one and no on the other. These she had folded and placed before the family deity of Radha Krishna. She had then asked Shirodakasai to pick one of the papers. Shirodakasai had done so, and in the presence of Mr. and Mrs. S and Radha and Krishna, he had opened the piece of paper on which was written the word yes.
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
That's nice. See, look at many things. You can observe that when it comes to seva, they have desire. Everybody wants, but no one wants to really sacrifice for anything to have to this. Okay, go ahead, Nipa, please explain.
So Prabhupada was empowered, certainly empowered, and he conducted himself very humbly. And there was no assistance. He took no assistance from others. He had repeatedly
No,
invited.
yeah. So basically, what is coming is you all remember Prabhupada. He never wanted to credit. He wanted to give the credit to all his god brothers. How he struggled, right?
Yes,
No one helped in India. Do your own, right? He
yes,
came to
yes.
America. He came to America. No one. He asked repeatedly, "Give me a little support." No one did. Now they're only coming for complaints. Very simple.
Yes, even the Prime Minister for financial assistance, he repeatedly wrote letters and letters and spoke to them for visa. It was like small, small things was a challenge.
No one helped. And now they're coming for this is the nature of this world. Okay, go ahead. Just wanted to give background, then you can connect what Prabhupada is saying, what is author is saying here. Go ahead.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, thank you. So Prabhupada was empowered. He conducted himself very humbly with no assistance from others. He repeatedly invited his god brothers uh, to join in West and take places with him in the Krishna conscious movement. And why had they not come forward to him to assist in the spiritual master's mission? And instead of complaining, then the one god brother who was carrying Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati's mission. So in they are just asking a question why they had not come forward and complaining. So it was not the place for Prabhupada's disciple to criticize actually. He had he had strictly warned them that they had no position in doing so. They should treat the god brothers as disciples of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati and on the level of their own spiritual master. Uh, but nonetheless, Prabhupada's disciples were very sorry and to see this lack of respect for their spiritual master. They could be humble and not protest, and they were like they should be affectionate toward persons who had criticized spiritual master and the Krishna consciousness movement. It's a question like whether they should be. Here it says they could be humble and not protest, but how could they be affectionate toward persons who had once criticized spiritual master and his Krishna consciousness movement? After the 5-day festival, Prabhupada had left for Vrindavana from Mayapur, where he planned to hold another ceremony, a groundbreaking, and Mayapur land was completely undeveloped at that time, and Prabhupada urged his disciples in India to collect funds necessary for it. And we are going to have a gorgeous plan at Mayapur. If you all could give the shape to this plan, and it would be one of its unique kind in the whole world. That's what Prabhupada is explaining. It will be a world center for teaching spiritual life, and students from all over the world will be there and revolutionize the atheistic and communistic tendencies of rascal philosophers. That's what he's saying. So we must be responsible for the great task, and that's how he's requesting everyone to come together. February 1972, Prabhupada's absence from Vrindavana kind of was led to the inability to persuade Mr. S to grant legal permission for the ISKCON temple to be built on
I
the
will
land.
give a little brief here. Is that okay? So
Yes,
you remember, right? When Prabhupada came to Vrindavan, he was received well, very nice, very elaborate appreciation, and he asked for his planning to help us, the mistress. He said that I will give the land. You all remember? So I will give the land. So based on that, now Prabhupada is saying, okay, so we have to have a ceremony. It's called Bhumi Puja, right? So now in this 8 days, it looks like they have not yet, they're undecided. They're not. Just want to give again the background. Go ahead. Nipa, go ahead.
okay, bro. So, like, it was very difficult for them to persuade, but Choir and Shirodaka Sahi had pleaded Mr. S, and seeing Mr. S's indecision, he tried to persuade Mrs. S also. So, when two of them, Mr. and Mrs. S, had agreed, uh, they could not decide. So, what they did is they asked Shirodaka Sahi to write on two slips of paper, one is yes and one is no, and then in front of deity family deity of Radha Krishna, and then one they were Shirodaka Dasi was asked to pick one of the slip and where the answer came as yes.
Yeah, that's good. Sometimes people linger, they want to give. I have seen it also. They want to give and prolong. They have desire, but it's very hard to give, actually give. So we should learn from all these things. So we don't get into this. This is called anarthas. Some positive things are there, but anarthas are there. It is holding us to go further. Sridhari, I mean Srikar.
When Prabhupada had heard the news, he had been joyous. I am especially pleased upon you that you have secured the S land for Krishna. Now let us cooperate to build a wonderful center there in Vrindavan. In March 1972, Prabhupada returned to Vrindavan to sign the deed with Mr. S and to perform the groundbreaking ceremony. With permission from the Goswamis at the Radha Damodar temple, he arranged for quarters for his disciples so they would have a place to reside while the temple at Raman Reti was under construction. Yamuna. It just so happened that on the morning that the Goswamis were to sign an agreement with Prabhupada for use of the rooms at Radha Damodar, the electricity went out. Prabhupada's secretary had only an electric typewriter. So I reminded Prabhupada that I was trained in writing calligraphy. I had my writing pens with me. So immediately Prabhupada drafted the writing that he wanted, and I took it into another room, sat down and hand lettered a contract with gold embossing on all the capitals. Within 15 minutes, we presented it to Srila Prabhupada. Before the Goswamis, Prabhupada held up the document with pleasure and said, "Just see, my disciples are expert in everything. Now the devotees would be allowed to reside above his rooms in Radha Damodar temple, and they would also have access to his rooms for cleaning." Prabhupada felt it was a grand occasion, that it was something in writing for the preservation of his rooms in the Radha Damodar temple. To close the transaction for the land in Raman Reti, Prabhupada and Mr. S met at Magistrates Court in Mathura. In the presence of lawyers, they completed the formalities. Prabhupada saw it as Krishna's grace that he had acquired a good plot of land in Vrindavan, and writing to his GBC secretaries in America, he asked them to send as many men as possible to help in the new project. He described his intentions for raising up a very excellent center to revive the spiritual life for Vrindavan on behalf of Rupa and Jiva Goswamis. Prabhupada told Shiro Dakshai, "I want on this occasion huge prasadam should be prepared, and every man in Vrindavan should be invited and take prasadam." 2 days later, with 100 people attending, Prabhupada held the cornerstone laying ceremony at Raman Reti. Again, he descended into the ceremonial pit and placed the deity of Ananta, on whose head the temple would rest. But late that night, the land was attacked. An elderly Indian widow, with local fame as a sadhu, became angry that Mr. S had not given her the land, which she had several times requested. During the night, she sent Gundas to dismantle the brick foundation of the ceremonial cornerstone and to desecrate the pit, which had just the day been filled with flowers and religious objects. The Gundas dug open the hole, threw garbage into it, and stole the posted sign announcing the land's new ownership.
That's fun, huh?
Hmm. So when Srila Prabhupada heard that Shiro Dakshai was successful in obtaining the land, he was very joyous, and then and then then Srila Prabhupada says he's very pleased, and then he urged all his disciples to cooperate to build a wonderful center in Vrindavan. And then in March 1972, Srila Prabhupada returned to Vrindavan to sign the deed with Mr. S to perform the Bhumi Puja, the groundbreaking ceremony. And then, with the permissions from the Goswamis at the Radha Damodar temple, he arranged for a quarters for all his disciples to stay, so that at least they'll have some place to reside until the temple construction at Raman Reti is complete. So here Yamuna Mataji is recalling an incident. So it so happened that on the morning when Srila Prabhupada was about to sign the deed with Goswamis to get rooms for his disciples, the electricity went off, and then Prabhupada's secretary had only electrical typewriter. And then, so then Yamta Mataji, she immediately reminded Srila Prabhupada that she was trained in calligraphy, and then she had all those pens which she was trained earlier. And then, so Srila Prabhupada immediately drafted a letter, and then Yamuna Mataji took it to another room, and then she I mean hand lettered a contract, and then she on all the capital letters were gold embossed, and then presented it to Srila Prabhupada. And then Srila Prabhupada held up the document with pleasure before the Goswamis, and then said, "Just see how my disciples are expert at everything." And then the deed was signed, and then devotees were allowed to reside above the rooms, all in the above rooms at Radha Damodar temple. So Srila Prabhupada felt this entire thing as a grand occasion, as there is something in writing, legal writing, that for the preservation of his rooms, of his rooms in Radha Damodar temple. And then to close the transaction for the land of the acquired land at Ramanreti, Srila Prabhupada and Mr. S met again at the magistrate courts in Mathura. And then in the presence of all the lawyers, they completed the formalities. And then Srila Prabhupada saw it as Krishna's grace that he had acquired a good land in Vrindavan. And then he wrote to his GBC secretaries in America, and then he asked them to send as many men as possible to erect this beautiful temple in Vrindavan. And then he described his intention, saying that for raising up a very excellent center to revive the spiritual life for Vrindavan on behalf of Rupa and Jiva Goswamis. And then Prabhupada instructed Shiro Dakshai that to prepare a huge prasadam, and then everybody who is present for the groundbreaking ceremony should be fed sumptuously. And then 2 days later, there was 100 people who attended the groundbreaking ceremony at Ramanreti. And then Srila Prabhupada descended into the ceremonial pit, and then he placed the deity of Ananta, and then on whose head the whole temple would reside. So, but that night there was an elderly Indian widow, and then she was little angry with Mr. S that he had not given her the land, because she asked Mr. S many times in the past. And then so she was little angry, and then she sent some gundas to dismantle the brick foundation of the ceremonial cornerstone. And then the gundas came that night. They opened up the hole, they threw garbage into it, and then they destroyed the cornerstone, and also they stole the sign which announced the land's new ownership. Srila Prabhupada.
Can you believe this is the most spiritual place on earth? Has unlimited gundas. That too, they are saying is taking the form of a sadhu, Till now, I heard that in Vrindavan, a lot of gundas actually is dealing with it. And it's unbelievable. It's like as if like a Maya. Vrindavan land is like a very big issue. And that to Prabhupada's time itself, we can see, she claims to be sadhu, but she sent gundas to destroy everything, just out of okay. Is Sridhar is there?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, please read.
Um, Prabhupada was in his room at the Radha Damodar temple when he heard what had happened. He became angry and told his disciples to show the deed to the police. That night, several policemen guarded the land, and when the hired gundas came again, the police accosted them and warned them if they caused any more trouble, they would be arrested. And that was the end of that. Prabhupada had several times said that by becoming a devotee, one gains many enemies. The incident also served to confirm Prabhupada's conviction that ISKCON's taking possession of the land should be followed as quickly as possible by construction of a temple. They should at least encircle the land with a fence, build small huts, and live on the land while preparing for temple construction. Tejas. This will be the Krishna Balrama temple, Prabhupada said. We didn't really know what was going on. We all thought it was so far away. It was really the boondocks Ramanareti. Nobody was out there. It was such an isolated place, and there were lots of dacoits living out there. We thought if we are going to have a temple out here, no one will ever come. But Prabhupada said, wherever there is Krishna, everyone will come. Prabhupada's secretary Shyamasundara wrote to a god brother about the newly acquired Vrindavan property. Earlier in the day, before breakfast, Prabhupada sewed up the 4,800 square feet yard gift plot in Raman Reti where Krishna used to sport with friends in the forest, about 10 minutes walk from Radha Damodara. Prabhupada surveyed the land with the rope from his mosquito net, bargained for, drew up the deed for, went to Mathura magistrate's court for, and signed, sealed, and delivered in an instant. Prabhupada had asked me to request you that at least 50 men from the US must come to India immediately. At last, we have got a solid program in India. Huge projects at Mayapur, Vrindavan, and Bombay. All the lands are acquired, arrangements made, and everything by Prabhupada. But only a few of us men are here to struggle with an immense task, the biggest by far within the society, of developing these three places. And believe me, these three projects are more dear to Prabhupada than any yet contemplated. Prabhu, can you please summarize?
Sure. Thank you for reading. Srikar has been giving you a break lately. Okay. So Prabhupada was in his room. He heard this situation has happened. This Gundas is attacked. So he wanted to, show the deed to police and warn them if they cause more trouble, so they can be arrested. So basically, he wanted to secure his position. And one interesting thing I noticed that is from other places as well. Legally, things were done all the time. Even big temples, even 500 years back, all the temples were. Our devotees, acharyas were very particular about legal things. Very particular about everything is so legal. Prabhupada always works on paper. Even renting room, he makes sure the nice contract is made. At Radha Damodar temple. They could say, okay, we'll pay you, just stay. No, he is writing a legal agreement for that also. So Prabhupada said, at several times said that by becoming a devotee, one gains many enemies. This incident also served to confirm Prabhupada's conviction that ISKCON's taking possession of the land should be followed by quickly. Because if we have to occupy, otherwise, if you don't occupy, something will happen. At least put a fence and let's work on the temple. Tejas said this will be Krishna Balram temple. You know why Krishna Balram temple? Now you understand? Because that's Raman Rati. The place is Raman Rati where Krishna Balaram performed pastimes. It's a very nice place now, and everybody is saying what he's saying. Let's see what he's saying. We didn't really know what was going on. We all thought it was so far away. And it was all really the boondocks, Raman Rati. Nobody was out there. You all know that's the Dash temple made the whole Vrindavan, whole Braja at the center of everything. Because of his Prabhupada, this temple, whole Vrindavan, everything flourished. Vrindavan devotee, they know that it's because of Prabhupada, everything flourished actually. And not only that, even Jew temple also, it become like a center of everything. So he said, we thought we are going to have a temple out there, no one will ever come. Prabhupada, he was kind of, don't worry, when Krishna is there, everybody will come. And that's why Prabhupada's temple is always filled because of so much of devotion. Sam Sundar Prabhu wrote to his god brothers in that about acquiring of Vrindavan property. Now, right. Now Prabhupada is saying that. He says the 4,800 square yard. It's a big for India. 4,800 square yard. I don't know anyone been to Vrindavan yet, but I request all of you go in a humble devotional mood. Pray to Radharani so we can go. So he made the whole plan, and he also said that immediately 50 devotees, the American warriors, are to be sent. AJ, get ready. Looks like there's a call for you only. Yeah, you should be ready for your services. So 50 devotees come now. Mayapur project, now Vrindavan project, Now, Bombay project, there's so many projects are now. This it's a perfect time. Americans are ready to give. Till now, there are a lot of potential. There are a lot of positive things to do. They just need engagement, proper engagement. And Prabhupada said, please get 50 devotees quickly. And Gaurang wants to read. Yeah, Gaurang.
In the month while Prabhupada was away from Bombay, he had left on February 10th. The payment of 50,000 rupees was duly made. Slowly at first, a few devotees moved to Juhu and living in a tent. At night, the rats and mosquitoes would disturb the devotees' sleep. While attempting to clear the overgrown weeds, they came upon empty liquor bottles and overflowing sewage. Without Prabhupada's presence, their resolution grew weak. But when Brahmananda Swami returned from Calcutta, where he had been with Srila Prabhupada, Brahmananda Swami was inspired, and he gave the Bombay devotees new impetus. They would have to clear the land and raise a pandal right away. Brahmananda Swami had never put on a pandal program before, but he hired a contractor to build several chattai, palm frond, houses for the devotees and a festival tent. Even before the construction could begin, however, the devotees would have to thoroughly clear the land. Mr. Sethi, a neighbor and life member, hired a work crew to cut down the weeds and vegetation, and several life members and friends in Bombay also came forward to assist. Mr. N offered to help by sending one of his assistants, Mr. Mutter, to organize the hired laborers in clearing the fields. The devotees also worked in preparation for Prabhupada's return. Shishi Radha Rasa Bihari arrived at Hare Krishna land in a taxi, riding across the laps of several devotees. They had moved before, and this time their residence was a tent. They had first come to be with the devotees of Bombay during the Pandal program at Cross Maidan in downtown Bombay. On that occasion, there had been a procession to Chopati beach, and when the devotees had arrived, the Radha Rasabihari, beautifully dressed and decorated and installed in an ornate palanquin, had been awaiting them. Krishna was white marble and held a silver flute. Radharani's right hand palm forward extended a benediction. They were beautiful. So the month that Prabhupada was away from Bombay, the payment of 50,000 rupees was made, and few devotees moved to the Juhu land, and they started living in tents. But that was also like a austerity because in the nights there'll be rats and mosquitoes who would disturb the devotees' sleep. And when the devotees tried to clear the land, plus with the weeds, they came upon empty liquor bottles and sewage. And their like enthusiasm was slowly growing weaker. But then when Brahmananda Swami Maharaj, he came to the Bombay place because Prabhupada had requested him before to take lead. And so when Brahmananda Swami Maharaj came, he immediately started putting the devotees to work, how saying that clear the land and they had to raise a pandal where they would put up a pandal program for Prabhupada when he comes. And Brahmananda Swami Maharaj, he hired a contractor to build chattais, which are palm frond houses for the devotees, and a festival tent. And the different life members also started helping and assisting. Mr. Sethi hired a work crew to cut down the weeds and vegetation, and Mr. N offered to help by sending one of his assistants to organize hired laborers, and everyone was working in preparation for Prabhupada's return. And then the deities, Radha Rasvihari, had arrived at the Juhu Hare Krishna land. And these were the same Rasavihari deities that were used in the cross, cross Maidan. They were installed there. And Krishna was a white marble holding a silver flute, and Radharani's right hand was extended as his benediction.
What a wonderful thing, and so much of sacrifice. Unless these devotees had Krishna in their heart, they could not have taken all these austerities to bring benediction to everyone. Pranath, you can read.
Hare Krishna. After, oh yeah.
No, I think this you're right.
After their first appearance at Chowpatty, Radha Rasvihari had moved to the Akash Ganga building, where gradually the devotees had established a decent standard of deity worship. When Prabhupada had left orders that Radha Rasbihari should move to Juhu as soon as the down payment was made, some of the devotees had questioned him, why should the deity move before the facilities were proper? Shouldn't they wait until the temple was built? Once the deity is installed on a piece of property, Prabhupada had replied, no one will remove them. More than anyone else, Prabhupada was aware of the proper worship to be offered to Radha Rasbihari, but his emphasis now was on securing the land. How else, he reasoned, could he eventually give Radha Rasbihari a royal throne and temple unless they themselves first establish their right of proprietorship by taking up residence at Hare Krishna land? The arrival of Radha Rasbihari at Juhu also meant increased difficulties for the devotees who now had to struggle to maintain the morning japa and cook 6 daily offerings in the meager kitchen, when the other Rasbihari's tent was insubstantial and swayed in the wind. Srila Prabhupada, however, saw the move as a necessary transcendental tactic. He felt certain that everyone involved in serve the owners of the land, the Bombay municipality, would accept that the land belonged to Krishna since Krishna was already residing there. And because he was asking Lord Krishna himself to accept these inconveniences, he prayed to the deity, my dear sir, please remain here and I shall build a beautiful temple for you. So, talking about Radha Rasbihari deities and had moved to the Akash Ganga building and devotees were doing deity worship there, but Prabhupada's plan was to move the deities as soon as possible to Juhu, and although devotees questioned that the facilities may not be all proper there, and the proper temple should be built before moving the deities, but Prabhupada had that it's the other way around, that once the deities are installed there, then that nobody would remove them. And Prabhupada was although he knew fully well what are the standards and how to worship, but his primary focus was to secure the land, and then eventually give a nice altar and a nice temple built there. And uh, also there were they had to it was a little struggle for the devotees there to perform to maintain their own sadhana and cook 6 daily offerings in that in those challenging conditions there, but uh, then Srila Prabhupada also saw this as a transcendental tactic, the move there, and he felt certain that everybody involved, including himself, the owners of the land, the Bombay municipality, they would all accept that the land belonged to Krishna once the deities were installed there. And he also prayed to the deities that although it may appear that they are put through some inconveniences, but he prayed to the deities to remain there, and the promise to build a beautiful temple there.
Nice. 6 offerings already in the kitchen. There's no kitchen, looks like still.
Mm.
Vision.
By the time Prabhupada returned to Bombay, Radha Rasavihari were installed on the stage of the festival Pandal. Attendance at the festival was not as great as it would have been in downtown Bombay. No more than 500 people came a night, but Prabhupada was satisfied. This festival was on their own property, and this was only the beginning. Every evening, Prabhupada lectured at the Pandal and attended the Kirtana and Aarti before Radha Rasavihari. Panchadravida Swami had collected donations of 5 tons of dal, rice, and flour, and the devotees were regularly cooking enough khichari to serve 125 people free prasadam daily. In the evening, Prabhupada himself would give out halwa from the deity's plate, and the crowd, including well-to-do businessmen and their wives, would press forward to receive the prasadam. Prabhupada liked the festival so much that he told the devotees to arrange to keep the tent for a perpetual festival. Prabhupada lived on the land in a tent just like the other devotees until Mr. Acharya, one of the most favorable tenants living in the back of the property, invited him to stay at his home. Within a few days of his arrival at Juhu, Prabhupada was ready to hold a groundbreaking and cornerstone laying ceremony, another tactic for securing possession of their land. But it was more than a tactic, as he wanted a temple to be constructed as soon as possible. Radha Rasavihari should not remain standing in a tent, but should be protected by a silver and teak wood simhasana and a marble altar. They should be surrounded by deities of the two gopis, Lalita and Vishaka, and the temple should have marble domes more than 100 feet high. 1,000 should come daily and have darshana and prasadam. So when Prabhupada returned to Bombay, Radha Rasavihari deity was installed on the festival pandal, and the attendance was not that much great when it was compared to the downtown Bombay. Like no more than like 500 people came a night, but Prabhupada was satisfied because this festival was there on their own property, and it was just the beginning. And in the evening, Prabhupada lectured at the Pandal and attended the Kirtan and Aarti before the Radha Rasavihari and Rasavihari deity. And Panchadravida Swami had collected donations of like 5 tons of dal, rice, and flour. And the devotees were regularly cooking to serve people, like 125 people free prasadam daily. And Prabhupada in the evening would give out the halwa from the deity's plate, and the crowd, including the well-to-do businessmen with their wives, came forward to receive the prasadam. And Prabhupada liked the festival so much, and he asked the devotees to arrange to keep the tent for a perpetual festival. And Prabhupada stayed on this land in a tent, just like the other devotees, and until Mr. Acharya, one of the favorable tenants living nearby, he invited Prabhupada to stay at his home. And within a few arrival of Prabhupada at Juhu, he was ready to hold the groundbreaking and the cornerstone laying ceremony, which was another tactic for securing the possession of the land. And it was more than a tactic because he wanted the temple to be there, like constructed as soon as possible. And because he felt that Radha Rasavihari should not remain standing in the tent, but it should be protected by a silver and teak wood simhasana and a marble altar. And they should be surrounded by the deities of two gopis, Lalita and Vishaka, and the temple should have marble domes like with 100 feet high, and 1,000 should come daily for darshana and prasadam.
Very good. Jai Shri Radha Ras Bihari ki Jai, Jai Shri Radha Madhav ki Jai, Jai Shri Krishna Balram ki Jai. Today we primarily discussed about very prominent temples which Prabhupada established in the temple in India. That's a great move. It looks like spiritually, it cannot be easy. You really have to fight, otherwise nothing comes up. So I want to thank you everyone for joining. We will meet tomorrow. Yes. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Have a good night.